It's time for another episode of Reflections, and this one is going to be with MSL, the in-game leader of Team Dignitas. Now, I know, like a lot of the Danish CSGO players, actually, you come from Source, not 1.6, because, I mean, it just so happened that most of the top talent is the Source players. So when I had a little look back through your history, you know, you were playing in and around basically the players that became your first team, first big team in CSGO, Western Wolves. You know, Nille was in your team. There was obviously basically everyone else. Glaive was out there on another team. Who else would we do? Nico obviously was off with like SMF and those guys. These guys were all playing Source all around the same time. How good was MSL as a Source player? Like, what type of role did you play? How good were you?
I would say that I was pretty good. I was mostly the second caller in Source as well, and sometimes on some teams I was the in-game leader as well. But yeah, it began from the bottom, and I just got better and better and better, and obviously came on better teams. So yeah, I would say like top 20 player in Denmark in Source at the end.
So one of the interesting things about the first, like I said, Western Wolves, the first really good team you were on. I mean, you were on the Nexus team that was at the beginning of CSGO, but obviously CSGO was very small, you know, and that team had to kind of like do a few roster moves before things got sorted out. So when you made this team, Western Wolves, and obviously it became a very good team, it had the 2 second places to NIP, and then you had a bunch of other pretty good results. When you, like I say, the players to make this team were basically already out there in Source like a year or two before, you know, playing at LANs on different teams. Were the actual players in this team like good in Source? Were there people who were like close to being like the next breakthrough people, etc.? Like how did this team kind of get together?
Basically, Glaive and Nico was really good players in Source as well. Nille was really good, but he never got like the big chance to be good. But me, Nille, and Glaive were really good friends in Source, and we played like on and off for all the years. Some got offers and left, and then the 2 others were behind. So it was kind of like we have always been good friends, and we have been playing a lot together. Can you ask again?
Yeah, sorry, just keep going with that. That's a good answer. Okay, so here's a question then. So when you made this Western Wolves team was when we kind of got like a split between 2 teams. And what there was Western Wolves, which was this group, and then there was basically what was Copenhagen Wolves, and then it became itself Dignitas, and that was kind of like FeTiSh's crew, which was FeTiSh, eventually devised these players. And I noticed that team was basically a lot of the people who'd actually played with FeTiSh in Source. It was people like basically from that like Seacrass team or whatever he was on, you know, like 3K2 and Once and people like that. And that was like the core of the people he started off with, cajunb, etc. Was there always a divide between these 2 teams? Were the teams actually friendly? Because obviously now, with one eventually, that actual group becoming like the dominant team, becoming TSM and Astralis, you know, they kind of became that obvious like feeder team system, which we're going to obviously have to talk about in this interview, you know, where that was like the top team. And so people obviously went over. But at this point in time, it seemed like these were like divided, these 2 different core groups. Was there actually like a rivalry in that sense? Or could any of you have just played with each other back then, do you think?
I think we were pretty much divided. The only player that could probably play with the other team was Nico, and he went on the team sometimes. But yeah, I think it was pretty much divided between those 2. And like me and Nille played on a separate team in the start of CSGO called the Nexus with Pimp as well, where Nico and Glaive played with the Copenhagen Bulls, and like we played really good on a Nexus, and I think Nico and Glaive sort of saw how much we were improving, and they contacted me and wanted to play with me, and they actually wanted to have Frost and Warns in the team as well. Okay. But I wanted to have Nille and Pimp with me because it's my really good friends, and they were playing as well as me, so I got them convinced, and yeah, we became Western Wolves, and we did some really good results. So
Okay, so you mentioned once there, and obviously he did play a brief amount of time actually with the Copenhagen Wolves crew. Now he's an interesting person because I didn't follow Source, but everyone I followed and I know from Source, if I talk to them about Source, like sure they obviously mentioned the big names, you know, RPK, Shocks, etc. But all the Danish guys tell me that once basically in Source like was up there with those guys, you know, like he was some fucking beast player. And then obviously he started out CSGO, but he didn't really last that long. Like, he kind of just like bailed out in 2013 basically. And like maybe he was around online team after that, but it never went fully at CSGO, you know, before it got big. What was your reasons to not wanting to have this player in if he was some super duper Source player?
I just always felt like friendship have always been really important for me and a team.
Okay.
And I basically just wanted to play with Nille and Pimp because they were really good and friends I have played with for 5 years or so. But yeah, Warnes was a beast in Source. I just never think that he kind of gave it his all on CSGO. And yeah, that's probably one of the reasons I said no to that.
Okay, so when Western Wolves really got rolling and it was sort of in like the spring of 2013, you had this run where you went to the Copenhagen Games final, and then afterwards you went to the final of, what was the event after that?
We played Mad Cats Vienna.
Mad Cats, that was before actually. Yeah, I got it the wrong way around. It was Mad Cats, then it was Copenhagen Games. So you made it to the final of these two tournaments, and to do so, you obviously had to beat very good teams, Very Games, for example. When this like run happened and your team got really good, one of the things that a lot of people pointed out is, and made this team exciting actually, is that it wasn't like you were just like NIP, you know, a bunch of skilled players just shooting everyone's heads off. You could see this was a team that had like a structure in it, and it had tactics, and it had like, yeah, okay, Nico might be a star player, but most of the other players kind of played set roles within the team. Was this from the outside? That's what it looked like. Was it like that inside Western Wolves?
Yeah, in Western Wolves we had the best team play I have ever seen. Like we just have so good team players that didn't care so much about stats or didn't care about how they were looking. We just played really well together, combined with like Nico playing absolutely insane, and Pimp and Glaive could also play great, and I also played great at that time. Nille was like, he had the hard role being an entry fragger, and he just did his job. And yeah, me and Nille have always been playing really good together on CT side, and I think Pimp and Glaive and Nico did a good job, like playing good on their side. So it was like really, the team play was insane, and our skill wise, we weren't as good as the other top teams, but we would beat them solely on playing better together.
This might sound like a crazy thing to say, because if someone makes two finals in a row, usually you should be able to be like, oh, you know, could you have won this one? Like, was it unfortunate you didn't get the title? But at the time, like, basically no one beat Nip. Nip used to just literally beat everyone, and obviously they literally hadn't lost a match to anyone ever. So I remember watching those finals. Like, I think the Copenhagen Wolves, the Copenhagen Games one is the one that really sticks in my mind, because that was the one where like they just wrecked you so hard on train that Kjaerbye was just like styling, buying that fucking auto sniper. And when this happened, as an outsider, it was kind of just like, wow, Western Wolves did a really good job even to get to the final. You know, like no one can beat Nip. Like, did they feel unbeatable?
Yeah, they felt absolutely unbeatable. Like, we were just happy with the second place, and yeah, Nip was too good to anyone at that point. Also, like, even our team play couldn't beat that.
So one of the interesting things about their team is, sometimes I say this to people and they don't know what I mean, but the problem with when people are really successful in the game is that a lot of people are going to try and copy what they do and think, right, well, they've figured something out, we're going to do that as well. So I actually feel like the fact that Nip were the ones who always won all those early tournaments, and for example, like Very Games was the tactical team, but they lost all the time, made people think, oh, in Counter-Strike, you're not supposed to play a really tactical style, right? What you're supposed to do is just get the best aim as you can, and what you do is you try and find like favorable aim duels, basically what like teams like Envious and the last era of Fnatic tried to do, you know, as their like approach to the game. And sure, that style can work, you know, if you've got some amazing players. But it feels like it took a while before people acknowledged that there was like a real tactical side to the game. You know, what do you think about this kind of the idea of like different styles and different balances? Like, does CS:GO have a bias towards one of these? Do you think? What do you think of that?
I think that most teams like knew that Nib at that point played like with so much confidence and so much skill that you couldn't copy that. I don't think many teams tried to copy that. But I think it's up and down. Like some years it feels like people are leaning to the team play side, and some years it feels like people are trying to just get sick gamers. But the way we always have approached the game is team play, combined with firepower.
Yeah. So, I mean, like you say, this is obviously, if you look at your career, that's kind of been the approach that nearly all your teams have been involved with. Western Wolves, the old Dignitas lineup, this one as well, obviously. Is that specifically, like, for example, do you have that philosophy and then you get players that fit that? Or do you fit that to the players? Like, for example, if tomorrow, okay, I made MSL where Carrigan is now and he was in FaZe, and all you have is just aim stars, but actually they're probably their worst thing is team play at the moment. You know, they haven't figured that part out yet, or who knows if they will. Maybe they don't have the personnel for it. If you had all the aimers, would you go with the loose style? Would you always go back to this team play style?
I actually think that this team is like, we have really good individualists like on FaZe. So what we have done is like trying to build a lot of team play, but also play a bit loose. So it's not full team play anymore. It's like a bit of both. Yeah, if that answers your question.
Okay. So when you were in the Western Wolves team, obviously the in-game leader was actually Glaive. Like, not a lot of people know that. And what's funny is people not only didn't know that, because if they see your name, they're going to think you were the in-game leader, but also people have gone the other way recently where they think Glaive was the in-game leader of Heroic, whereas actually he wasn't. It was Snappy. So it's confusing, okay? But the reason why I want to nail it down is this. When Glaive was in Western Wolves, that was basically the only time he was like playing at the top level. After that team, he was always kind of like a guy where he reminds me of what happened to Moddy in the Swedish scene, actually, where he was just kind of like cast off, and it just felt like there was never a way back for him. You know, he was always going to have to be in like the third or the fourth best Danish team. When he was actually the in-game leader of Western Wolves, what was his style as an in-game leader? What was he good at?
He was really good at reading the game. He was a good leader, and I think the fact that me and him worked so well together was one of the reasons that we played so well. But yeah, he was a really good, like, he read the game on point, and he knew how to build up the team. Like, Glaive was one of the persons that I learned a lot from, and yeah, he's a really good in-game leader.
What do you think about this fact then that in the later years, obviously, first of all, he had, so let's just say, I mean, the polite way to say it is like he had like political problems getting into top teams, you know? That's one way to say it without having to go into all the gory details. So, okay, he had these political problems, but then also I noticed, I mean, I used to ask Pimp every time, like, what's Glaive doing in his teams now? And he used to tell me, oh yeah, he's not the in-game leader of any of these teams now, you know? What do you think about the fact that, I mean, obviously now he's going to be the in-game leader in Astralis again. Why do you think he just abandoned that? What do you think of that? I mean, I thought he was, in Western Wolves, one of the better in-game leaders.
Yeah, he was. I think he was the best in-game leader at the time. I think one of the reasons that, like in Source, he have always been the second caller. And he was really good at both fragging and helping the in-game leader. So I think that he felt like after Western Wolves that he kind of wanted to frag more and then still help on the side. Because normally when you get to be the in-game leader, you focus a lot more on the team and you forget a lot about your own play. And I kind of think that's what he didn't want to do anymore.
Okay. So when you were in Western Wolves, like I kind of outlined there, you weren't the in-game leader, you know. I mean, you're saying here, like, you in many of your teams, you played a secondary caller role. So when you were in Western Wolves, is it fair to say MSL was like the support player or whatever term people want to use in that sense, a role player, whatever you want to say?
Yeah, I was a role player, but also a fragger. Like in the start of CSGO, I was actually doing quite a good job. I think I was top 5 in Denmark stats-wise in the start of CSGO. So yeah, I was both a support player but also a fragger, I would say.
So does the fact that you've now made this transition to being the full in-game leader, I mean, it took a while, like it wasn't straight even after this team, you know, it was like a year or two later. What made you decide, like, okay, I'm just going to become a full in-game leader? And obviously you've gone like the full approach, like very disciplined style. Obviously it takes up a lot of time, like you're saying here. Obviously it affects your individual game if you become that sort of an in-game leader. What made you decide to embrace that and take it over?
I have basically, like, after Western Wolves, I played with less good teams, and I felt like I was not getting anything out of it, and I was not motivated or anything. So yeah, the start of me being the in-game leader was basically that I talked with Aizy and Pimp, and they didn't want to play with FeTiSh anymore, and I sort of just saw the chance to be the in-game leader. I always wanted to control things, and it was like a new chapter for me to get more motivation and yeah, try it. So that's basically how it went down. I just wanted to take the chance and try to be the in-game leader, basically.
Do you, obviously you enjoy success, but do you actually enjoy being this sort of in-game? Like if it was up to you, I mean, I remember I saw with this coaching change, before that got cancelled, you did say like, yeah, I'm going to give up being the in-game leader. It sounded like you were looking forward to it, right? Because obviously you would get to play a bit more individually. If you had a perfect scenario, whatever, years from now, would you rather be the second caller again and kind of have someone else do the main role of that? Or would you pick this? Where do you come down on that?
It's a bit of both, but I think I would prefer to be the in-game leader now. The reason why, one of the reasons why I stepped down from calling was that I could feel that people wanted to try something new. We have been playing like the same style for a long time, and I was like, yeah, people just wanted to try something new. So I told them that I would like to be lurking. Because at that time I have got a lot of shit from also the community about not fragging as well, so I wanted to try to be the lurker and still help with calls and so on, like in Western Wolves. But at the same time, I also wanted to my team to be most successful, and I think that me being the caller and having the role I have on the team now is the way that I can make a team successful, mostly.
So even though, like, anyone who didn't follow early CSGO and heard the first part of this interview will be like, oh, wow, so this Western Wolves team was, like, getting second place at these tournaments. Like, oh, what happens next in the story? Like, obviously the next chapter is pretty depressing because the team basically just, like, spirals out of control, and by the end of the year, it's just outright dead. Now, one of the interesting things about this is, I know in the past when I've done interviews with Pimp and people like this, he kind of like shares the responsibility around, like, for example, I think like Nilly at one point quit, for a week and then came back, and then you had, but I think as an outsider at least, if I look at the problems with Western Wolves, I have to feel like a lot of it is Nico, because Nico was kind of like the star player, right? And he was the primary AWPer, but he's someone where if you look at his CSGO career, he's been kind of like an off and on player. Like he just seems to, for some weird reason, he just loses motivation in CS and he leaves for a while, or he doesn't practice as much, or at the end his play just got worse, and yet in this team he was obviously a very important star player type figure. So obviously in this early days of Western Wolves, I can understand that CSGO wasn't huge, you didn't get like 10k salary and have a chance to win millions and stuff, but was Nico's motivation and this sort of thing an issue with Western Wolves not being able to continue, do you think?
I think it was a mix of many things. Like, it was not only Nico, it was Kjaerbye, it was Nille. Like, it was basically because there wasn't like money in it, and the professionalism is not like it is today. Combined with like personal things in the team that made the trust disappear completely, and yeah, that's basically. Yeah, okay. I can't tell more than that, but... Okay.
When you had this period where Western Wolves died off, okay, people like Nico, Pimp, they still had a chance to maybe make it. Like, some of them got to play on Copenhagen Wolves and have their chance to be in other teams, But it looked for quite a while. Like, I mean, the Glaive thing, okay, as I've kind of referenced before, he had his own issues in the scene where people didn't like him. But for you and Nille, it literally just looked like, oh, it's the end for these guys. I mean, again, they have to kind of play in like the third, fourth best Danish team. Obviously, Nille eventually had some problems with like a VAC ban or something that's kind of ruined his career. Did you ever worry during like that middle portion of CSGO? Like, oh, maybe it's done for me in terms of being a top pro. Like it's at the time, it did seem from the outside like it's going to be a hard, like hard path to get back in the top teams.
Yeah, I felt that it would be really hard. Like I got left behind the two good teams in Denmark because when Western Wolves finished, me and Glaive could not play together at all. So I kind of got left behind on the third or fourth team in Denmark, and it felt like, it felt like you were saying like maybe it's the end, but yeah. Happily, I got the offer from Dignitas in the start of 2015, so that's when everything went good for me.
One of the problems I always thought for some of these players we're talking about from Western Wolves being able to make it into other teams is that if you look at Western Wolves, as we've kind of described, they weren't thought of as these are the mad fraggers, these are the super skilled players. Everyone used to give the team credit, but it was as a team, they're a very good tactical team and these players play their roles. And the problem is, if you look at Copenhagen Wolves and then what became Dignitas, Astralis, etc., they obviously did go down like the superstar route, like let's get the sickest aimers and we're just going to build off that. And I've noticed in general, people who are sick aimers often have a bias towards like judging everyone just on skill, and being like, oh, I'm better than that guy, so I wouldn't want to play with him, Do you think this is an issue that kept you out of being able? I mean, you've never been in a position where you could have joined basically the Astralis core, right? You were never available in that sense.
No, I never got offer from them, and I think it's mostly because I think they never had an idea of playing with me. Because we never had like some personal stuff together or anything, and I think they always felt like I was a noob compared to them.
Okay. So since you came in and your first like real job as an in-game leader obviously was replacing FeTiSh on Dignitas, and he used to be also the rival leader of that Copenhagen Wolves core when they had that team going. Right, it's easy from the outside to look at FeTiSh when he was in basically the team that became Astralis and be like, well, he obviously had some problems because Carrigan came in and basically it was almost like tomorrow, the day after, they were just winning stuff and so it's easy to go, well, obviously FeTiSh was something of a problem, but people might forget this because it was at a lower level, but he actually did the same thing in Dignitas. He was in Dignitas and he was having all these problems, and then you came in and replaced him, and again, almost instantly, things turned around. Since everyone tells me from source that he was like a legendary leader, and like a veteran and a lot of... What do you think his issues were in CSGO? Is he having some sort of specific problem, do you think? Did he have a set way of thinking he had to play the game?
I think he got stuck on like playing in his way and not adapting to the game, that you could actually do quick stuff, and FeTiSh was really good at doing a default and then go from there and read the game. But he never got surprised teams, and I think that's the biggest issue for him in CSGO. But I think he was a great in-game leader in Source, where it was not so much run and shoot, and I also think that he have had sick aimers all day long, so I think he had a pretty easy job compared to others.
Okay. So you already kind of referenced that when you were around Glaive, I mean, he was your in-game leader for a while. You learned a lot from him. And if people look, they will see that obviously your teams are closer to the Western Wolves of Glaive than the other Danish teams in terms of the style and how tactical. And again, it's about team play. Can you give us like a couple of concepts or the way he did things? What did you take from Glaive, do you think? What about Glaive transitioned into what MSL as an in-game leader?
Mostly the way he did defaults and the way he communication wise, he learned me a lot about communication and playing together as a team. But it was something that we did together. I just think that it's the way he plays, it's the way he talks on TeamSpeak that made. I learned a lot from him. I can't describe it any better. Okay. I don't know.
So, since Glaive has now, at the time of this recording at least, become the in-game leader of Astralis, and obviously that's a team where they've been famous for always having talent, but never getting over the ultimate hump, you know, like even if they were, I always said, the reason why Astralis had some sort of problem is they could beat the exact same teams if it was in a normal tournament the week after, but if it was called the major, then somehow that's when they couldn't beat the same team, you know. I mean, obviously the best example ever, I think, is when they got destroyed by NIP at Cluj-Napoca, because this is a team where you put them in that same match any other day of the year, they probably just win easily, you know. They were a much better team. So he's got a lot on his shoulders coming into Astralis, because people still expect that. They still feel like you look at that talent and they should be able to win one day. Do you actually think, if you had to make a prediction now, if we did another interview 1 year from now and it was like part 2, would Astralis under Glaive's leadership have won a major by then? What do you think? Give him a whole year.
I don't think so with this lineup. I feel like they have the mixture, the wrong mixture together, and I don't think they want to play the same way. But okay. I think they will become better than now, but I don't think they will win a major.
Right, okay. So when you had the old Dignitas lineup, so we're talking about the one where it was Pimp and it was Aizy, and these were kind of the bigger names in the team. Obviously, Pimp is someone who also was with you back in the Western Wolves days. And actually, I always thought back then he was a bit underrated, because again, people used to just go, Western Wolves, this is a tactical team, not so skilled. Nico's really skilled, he's an AWPer, and that used to be like it. That was like the description. But people never mentioned that. I mean, Pimp was a pretty decent fragger back then. What has Pimp been like in the different teams? Because you got to see him when he was much younger, and then you've seen him obviously in the modern day, and then in Dignitas as well with you. What is Pimp like as a player?
He's he got great individual skill, good aim, and he's also good at communicating. He's a good team player. I think all around he's a great player. The only problem that he had with us in Dignitas, for example, was his attitude. He's a really good player.
So, okay, there's 2 Pimps in Dignitas that I need to talk about MSL. So there's Pimp, the really sick rifler who I thought was awesome, you know, and he's winning clutches all day, and he was a superstar player. And then there was this Pimp guy who was the AWPer. So we're going to leave that second one aside for a second, okay? Let's just focus on the good part. There was this really good rifler called Pimp. Like, in that team where you had Aizy and Pimp, and they were both at the time like considered very skilled players, like how would you compare that Dignitas to this Dignitas? Because you had your 2-star players there, and you have your 2-star players. How were they different, or how did you use those 2 players particularly?
I think the fact that I was in-game leader for first time, if I knew what I know now back then, I think I would have gotten way more out of that team. Because Aizy and Pimp was performing so well. I just think that I could have gotten way more out of Nico and Kjaerbye if I knew what I knew now. Okay.
So what is from the teams that you've been in and with, how should an in-game leader use Pimp? How do you think he's best used?
I think he's best used as being the lurker on the side and give information and come in second or third. And basically, he should not be AWPing, that's for sure. But yeah.
So, okay, you mentioned that. We obviously have to talk about it because, again, Pimp in the summer of 2015 looked like he was a prime as a player, you know. In fact, I was thinking at the time, like, oh, he's obviously going to be in this team a long time, or maybe even he gets a shot in Astralis one day. And then this move happened where he became the primary AWPer of the team. And I won't put all the blame on you because I happen to know from talking to Pimp privately over the years, he always secretly thought he was some sick AWPer and was like, oh, I could do it if I needed to, you know. And it almost felt like any time the team needed an AWPer, he'd just be like, yeah, I could do that. I could be the AWPer. But this experiment of him being the AWPer didn't work out, did it? What was the problem, do you think?
I think he is just not like a good AWPer in this game. He was actually quite good in source with the AWP, but I don't think he's a primary AWPer in this game. He likes to go for the flicks, and he isn't hitting them as well as he wants to, I think. But about him being the Orba on the team, it was a stupid decision. He really wanted to be the Orba, and he told me like flat out that he wanted to Orb, and that's how it is. And told him, yeah, we give it a shot. And I think actually him being so strict on wanting to Orb was one of the reasons that he probably got kicked also, because he wanted to control way more than he should have. I think Pimp's biggest problem have probably been he wants so much control, but I think that if he just played his game and thought about his game, he would be so much better. Also for also team wise, like make the team better.
Okay, so I mean, you've kind of touched on some of this part here about how he not only just like his opening, but how he wanted to do it. The problem is, from the outside, if someone didn't know any of the politics of the team, right, and they just see them playing in the server, it looks from the outside like you had this really sick rifler called Pimp, and then all of a sudden one day he has to be the AWPer, and he was pretty bad. And he was having some games where he was really struggling, you know, and he wasn't a star player anymore. When this happens and then he gets kicked, some people from the outside are going to be like, oh, Dignitas ruined Pimp, you know, they made him be the AWPer and stuff. Now you're saying here like he wanted to be the AWPer, etc. But was it the fact that when he made himself the AWPer and was playing badly, that combined with personality issues, like you were saying, like attitude problems, was it the two combined that meant like basically he got kicked?
Yeah, for sure.
Was it not possible to kind of like rehabilitate him? Couldn't you have turned it around?
We tried many times to have a real talk with him, and I also tried it. So, like at that time, I think he felt like he was the leader of the team, and he felt like he could do basically anything that he wanted, and that combined with him not fragging as much as he did with the rifle is 100% why he got kicked.
So there's a story about Aizy from this era, 2015, like late summer going into autumn, which I think some people might remember, but it never fully got out there. And basically it goes like this. Astralis was going to kick Xyp9x, and they wanted to get Aizy to replace him. I mean, that's obviously a nightmare for the roles, but whatever. They were going to do this, and they were going to figure it out however they were going to figure it out. So they were going to do this move, basically, and something like they couldn't like get an agreement from Dignitas to do the move. Or so. That's what I heard, okay. And so instead, what's funny is they didn't do the move. Xyp9x found out about this, like someone basically told him like, yeah, you were going to get kicked, and somehow, I mean, lucky for Astralis, that actually somehow made Xyp9x like, oh well, better be more motivated. So amazingly, it worked out not doing this move. Is that accurate? Like basically, was it Dignitas that stopped Aizy going to Astralis at the time? TSM they were called, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, it was. We didn't want it to let Aizy go, if I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure that's how it is, but I think it was great for Astralis because Xyp9x was a fucking god after that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, yeah. So the interesting...
But honestly, I can't fully remember what went wrong. Like, I'm pretty sure that either Odie didn't wanted him out or something else. I'm not 100%.
Okay, because here's the thing. This is obviously going to be a topic that has to come up in this interview, because as I alluded to earlier in the interview, right, that the difference is when there was Western Wolves and there was Copenhagen Wolves, these were two teams that were both good. They were both on a similar level, similar kind of money. You know, there's no reason why like one has to like steal all the players from the other one. But as soon as like basically the core that is Astralis now became like not just the best Danish team, but like one of the best in the whole world. And in the past, Dignitas didn't used to have as much money and didn't used to have in fact, they didn't have as good a team. It was pretty obvious that in the past, anytime someone from Astralis wants someone from Dignitas, they just reach down, they take them, and then you lose the player. And I know for in-game leaders, this is obviously a very frustrating thing in history. It's actually happened to a lot of great in-game leaders. You know, they keep getting a star, they raise him up, they make him effective, and then it's almost like they're auditioning him to go and leave them and join the other team. And he's like, well, I have to start all over again. This obviously, to some degree, hasn't happened as much recently. Like we're saying here, in this Aizy case, he didn't have to go. But at the moment, MSL, people are worried because we should all just be like, awesome, well done, mate. You won that massive tournament, Epicenter. The future's so bright. You're the number one Danish. But you know, everyone, including Astralis, is like, yeah, but sooner or later, we'll get some of those players. What is this aspect being like for you? Because it's obviously something you have to deal with every few months in theory.
Yeah. it was pretty devastating every time it happened. Like it happened 2 times with Aizy. First, he got poached by Astralis, and he couldn't get out. And then FeTiSh, obviously. But I understood his decision, even though it hurts me that I lose a player like that. It feels like shit, and you kind of wanna just say fuck this. But yeah, I know that it's nothing personal, and he just had a better chance at getting more money. And obviously, at the time that Aizy left, he was the only one performing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I fully understood him leaving, but it hurts anyway. And it's the same kind of thing when Kjaerbye left for Astralis.
Sure, yeah.
Kjaerbye was like, me and him was really good friends, and I really hoped that he would say no at that time. But I understood his decision, and I also told him like I understand it fully. But yeah, it have been shit to lose players left and right, but now we're on top.
Okay, so that's the question then, MSL, this is the big question everyone really wants to know, has that stopped? Because at the moment, Dignitas is a better team than Astralis. Dignitas as an org is as good as Astralis right now. Got as much money, got all this great backing that they now have. In theory, now that shouldn't happen. In fact, if anything, someone could even make the case, why doesn't it go the other way now? Why doesn't MSL get to pick any players he wants to come over if he wants them in the future, you know? But a lot of people, me included, and by the way, I think Astralis still think this, they still think, yeah, that could all be true. You could be better than us in all those ways. But the difference is, if like a big name like Device goes to someone and goes, listen, you should come and play with me, mate. Like, we'd be so sick. Does that still exist to some degree, do you think? Is it still a worry?
Yeah, I think it exists for sure. And yeah, I'm not sure what I can talk about, but nothing will happen on our team.
Okay.
But let's just say that somebody got poached again, and yeah. But nothing is gonna happen this time, and I'm really happy about that.
Okay, right. So let's rewind it a bit then, because in this conversation you touched on the Aizy topic, and that's a great way to frame it, which is that the problem with the Dignitas lineup in 2015 is you had the summer period where the whole team was doing well. Like, this was looking like a really solid team. Aizy and Pimp are like really doing their roles well. You're kind of like learning your role still. Then when Pimp has that terrible AWPing period is when you'd had to kick Nico and he takes over as the AWPer. Like, what were the problems that Nico had in that Dignitas? Because like people will think, okay, that everyone was being harsh on him, etc. But forget like everyone making fun of Smiths, etc. Now, like Smiths isn't a very good AWPer, but he's not like the primary. He's not like the star player of the team. You know, Nico used to get the AWP every round. It felt like, and there was times when he was having games, you know, where he had like 5 kills. What was his problem in Dignitas, do you think?
I think his biggest problem was motivation to play. Like he have always had a tough time, like spending a lot of time playing, and it was the same in Western Wolves. He could go to events with 20 to 30 hours, and then he would wreck them in Western Wolves. But he couldn't do the same here because people have catched up and people have played much more. And yeah, I think basically it was more about motivation for him, and he was like this for many months in Dignitas, that he said to us, I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna play like insanely much and get better.
Yeah.
But nothing happened, and that's the reason he got kicked. But I also think that if I knew what I know now, he would have become better, because I didn't set him up as good as I could. So yeah, it's not entirely his fault. It's also mine. But
like what do you think needed to be done differently in that team?
I think I should have given him more space to play, to get peaks, and not like the way I played at that time. It was better to have 5 AKs as T, for example.
Okay.
But as CT, he wasn't good either. So it was like, yeah, mainly his own fault, but I also take a little bit of the blame.
Okay, and then the other issue that you kind of alluded to was when Aizy left to go to FaZe. But I like you say here, I can kind of understand, because since that was when the pimp change had happened with the AWP and he was playing bad himself, the team dropped off. And if you remember, that major, it was also Cluj Poker actually, was the one where basically Dignitas came in last place, but Aizy still went crazy in the 2 games, and that got him onto FaZe. Obviously, and at the time, you know, FaZe wasn't a much... Obviously, at the time, actually, FaZe was a very good team. And they were G2, and they'd obviously gone to the semis. And it was a lot more money, etc. Dignitas wasn't as big an org, right? One of the downsides, though, is like, yeah, great for Aizy. He's had all this money. He's got to play on a big-name team and get the sticker. You know, that's all cool for business. But as a player, he's kind of been wasted ever since he left Dignitas, you know. I mean, FaZe hasn't done anything this year. They haven't had any deep runs. Unfortunately, they never really had the runs that they had when they got him. You know, he kind of came in just after they had the little bit of success. What do you think the secret to using Aizy is? Because sometimes it looks like he's a bit lost in FaZe, you know.
Yeah, it feels like he is lost. He haven't performed nearly as good as he did in our team. I think that the reason he is not performing in FaZe is because he doesn't get set up as well as he could, and he needs someone to make him set up. Like
what role should he be, do you think?
He should be the second guy in. Like in Dignitas, I always went first, and then he would trade, and basically after that he would also like kill maybe 1 or 2 more. So yeah, the second guy in, and as CT, he should just get the positions that he wants, because he's an absolute fucking monster.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Do you feel like, I mean, obviously with Carrigan coming in, maybe something could still happen in FaZe, but it's been so long where everyone knew he's going to be on FaZe, and obviously like you can't come to the Danish teams. Now that there's so many good Danish teams, do you think the future is one day Aizy plays for a Danish team and he just becomes another star player in the Danish scene?
I think it's harder now for Aizy to get on the Danish teams, but I also feel like that Carrigan will probably make Aizy better. I'm actually quite sure about that. But I think it will be hard for him to come on Danish team because he have a very long contract. So.
Yep. And obviously buyouts, not so great from teams like that, right?
Not so great.
Okay. So one of the things about this particular time when he went is that he went off to FaZe. Well, it was G2, but you know what I mean. We're just using the modern names, guys. We can't go for every single different name of team. So he went to FaZe, and at the same time, Pimp was kicked, and so Pimp was out. And so the weird thing about this era of the lineup is, I'll admit, if you'd have asked me to place a bet then, like, can this core do anything? I would be like, definitely not. Like, this is going to be garbage, you know. They may as well go and make themselves Copenhagen Wolves or some team that was like the 3rd or 4th best team, because you just lost your 2 star players. And at the time, the obvious person who has to become a star player is Kjaerbye. But at the time, in the lineup with Pimp and Aizy, Kjaerbye wasn't even vaguely the player he is now, you know. And the interesting thing was, I actually did an interview with Kjaerbye at E-League, where it's one of those ones where you do like a really long interview, but because it's for television, you know, they cut out until it's like just 2 minutes. So no one ever saw any of these interview answers. But I asked him, actually, I said to him, did Pimp and Aizy leaving, and then he himself must have also known, like, well, there's not much like star talent in this team, I'm going to have to kind of be the star player. I asked him kind of like, did that have any effect on you? And he kind of said like, yeah, it was kind of like that. Like when they left, he kind of realized himself, like, you know, I can't basically like win the game if I'm just having an all right match. I have to be having a big impact on the game, and I have to figure out kind of almost like more selfish, like what is my role going to be and what am I going to get from the team? How much of that was like Kjaerbye himself figuring that out, and how much was you figuring out how to use him?
I think it was he felt kind of useless on the other team with Pimp and Aizy, and he wasn't performing at a good level. He was set up completely wrong, because I had to set up like Pimp and Aizy was the first.
Yep, sure.
So he kind of got a bad role for him. So after Pimp and Aizy left, and also the fact that, like at that time, Pimp was really tough against Kjaerbye, so I think his confidence was down.
Yeah,
totally down. But yeah, after Pimp and Aizy left, he got the roles that he wanted, and it was both of us. I think he set some roles that he wanted, and I also came in with what I think he would be good at, and it was mostly also on CT side. He would get the roles that, for example, Aizy had before. So yeah, I think we got him in the perfect roles together.
So when Kjaerbye became kind of, the star name in Dignitas, and this obviously later led to Astralis again just stealing him, like, well, you've got a good player there, we'll have that one as well. So when he became the star player, again, Dignitas again was in a position where people thought of a lot of the other team as like, oh, they're not like so good individually, but they've got a good team that does tactics, and then they've got this star player. What was actually Aizy's kind of role? What was he good at within that team, do you think? How were you using him?
In Dignitas with Pimp and Aizy?
No, the one after, the way it was mainly Kjaerbye as the star player. The one earlier this year.
Who was? Can you ask again?
What were you? How was when Kjaerbye was the star player earlier this year before he went to Astralis, when Pimp and Aizy were gone and it was the lineup with Tensky and RUBINO, etc. What was kind of like the way you used Kjaerbye? What allowed him to be a star player? What was his role?
He was like he actually played like Cajun is right now with the orb. We didn't play with orb at that time. We played 5 AKs, so he was taking control with me and config, but at the same time he was maybe lurking a bit and going in as second or third guy. Yeah.
So keep going.
But with that team, like, I think everyone thought that we would become completely shit, like maybe top 20 or something, because on paper we shouldn't get close to something. But I think that's one of the moments I'm most proud of in my career, what I did with that team and the way I team built it in practice, and I think we got close to what Western Wolves were in terms of team play and communication and team chemistry and everything. So yeah, it was a great feeling to get it to work after kicking Pimp.
So, I mean, you've referenced here a bunch of times, like sometimes on T side, you would either with a team or want to with a team, you just essentially run 5 rifles on T side instead of an AWP. Now, it's funny because I don't know if it's because of people like Kenny S and Guardian just being so good with the AWP at times, but I know a lot of people, even like experts and players, who say, oh, you have to have an AWPer in your team. Like if you don't have an AWPer, you just can't be as good as a team. Every top team needs one. And it's like they just believe it themselves, okay? But I've seen many times, I mean, your teams have been good examples where sometimes the T side is just 5 AKs, it is just 5 rifles. Is there something... what is your approach to that philosophy? Like, when do you want an AWP in your teams? Like, do you do it just if the player's very good with the AWP? Like, what is the use of an AWP within an MSL team on T side?
It's basically if I have a good AWP, I will of course use it. At that time, it wasn't possible to get an AWP that was good enough, so we tried with 5 AKs and it worked really good. The problem was that when people figured out, they abused the AWP more against us, so it got kind of hard. Okay. But now I of course want to use Cajun as an AWPer, and I think we have set him up in a good way, and I think that he's doing a pretty good job.
Is there a benefit ever to just having 5 AKs? Like, is there something extra it brings?
You can easily make fast tactics, which we did a lot with the team, like with the old team. It's mostly fast tactics it's better, and like some maps it's easier to take map control with 3 AKs than like 2 AKs and 1 AWP. For example, on Mirage I would prefer having 3 AKs in mid instead of 2 AKs and an AWP. So yeah, on some maps it was better to have 3 AKs, and on some maps it was hurting us to not have an AWP, I would say.
So seeing these different lineups that you've had in Dignitas, where you were the in-game leader, I've noticed on the T side, so you often get a lot of credit for being a good in-game leader and setting the system up and having structure and tactics and all these sorts of things that sound great. But I know a lot of fans, when they think of like a in-game leader of this kind, they think that means he's the guy who's got like the deepest playbook, you know, like he's got 15 different strats, he's going to call this very specific secret one, you know, that no one knows. But I've noticed actually whenever I watch the Dignitas games, it looks more like you actually keep it kind of like simple, you know, like you just have a few tactics that you're going to run kind of over and over, and you're just going to kind of pick between which one you want to do at a time. What do you think of this? Like, what is your general approach? What's kind of the system that you run?
The system is kind of just having a default where people are really well played together and that we can get the trades going, and on like then we have fast tactics that I can use when I feel like they're gonna, for example, close Mirage. Like on Mirage they're gonna close middle now, then I will do a tactic on A. But it has been a different thing on this team than the others, because now we are trying to simplify things and make people have more space to make plays instead of me calling a lot. So it's kind of like a mix of both my structure and team play combined with the loose play.
Okay.
But yeah, that's it.
Okay, so when you had this Kjaerbye team, one of the things that became quite apparent was that for whatever reason on Cobblestone, you guys were just like very good on this map. You were, no, it's not like you had a super deep map pool. You weren't. People didn't think you was one of the best teams in the world, but on that map in particular, you had something figured out. And obviously, I think if you look in general, because Cobblestone can be so T-sided for the good Cobblestone teams, I've noticed that there's not many teams that become good Cobblestone teams that don't have like good tactics. Like the only two I can think of that were really good without good tactics was like Envious and Fnatic at one point, and that's just because they had like every aimer, you know, so they kind of like somehow got away with it. What were you good at on Cobblestone, do you think? Like, did this stand out for you as a specialty as well?
What?
Did it stand out to you as a special map for you at the time?
Yeah, of course it felt like it was the best map for us. I think we had a default that worked really great. We got, like, the thing that I do on T side is mostly making communication really good and making the teamwork really good, and especially on Cobble you can easily take map control if you're playing good together, and you can easily get the trades. So it's really easy to take map control, and from there we can do set goes or we can like fake them. And I just felt like on Cobble it's really easy to abuse people's bad things.
So the weird thing is, at the same time that your team was really good on Cobblestone, was the era when Astralis was still like, we will never play this map. This map is the worst, you know. And yet, Kjaerbye went over to their team. He was obviously a good Cobblestone in MSL's Dignitas. Then he tried to play Cobblestone there, still didn't work out. cajunb came from Astralis and is in your team. Seems perfectly fine playing Cobblestone. What do you think the problem is? Why couldn't Astralis just be good on Cobblestone? Do you have a theory?
I just think they didn't pick it up from the start. It's like if players are not feeling comfortable on the map, it's really hard to get good on. And cajunb had the same feeling, like maybe maybe the first month he felt like, what the fuck is going on and what should I do here and there. But we others were playing the map so good together, and I think he just chimed in and got comfortable on the map. So yeah, I just think it's about them not playing it, and that's why they're not good on.
So when we were talking about all those different times where either Astralis tried to poach a player or they just successfully poached a player, you know, the Kjaerbye one is another killer, because you know when we were describing the setup there of like, you can see that from the outside when Pimp and Aizy were gone, everyone was like, right, forget about Dignitas, that team's going nowhere. So if you then get the team to be pretty good, and Kjaerbye's become a really good player, when he gets taken, isn't that like that must have been the worst moment, right?
Yeah, that was absolutely the worst moment for me. And the team, everyone was really good friends with him, and he was playing really good and was an important factor in game, not only with his fragging but also his team play and communication. He was really important. But again, we got cajunb, which I felt like this could be a really, really good trade for us.
Yeah.
But at the time, we didn't have enough firepower to make that successful. And I think that, like, when we had Tensky, we didn't work together, and I wasn't as motivated as I have been on the other team, so I didn't do the work I should have done, and I didn't got, like, that's also one of the reasons that I stepped back, was because I really didn't do what I should have done, and that, of course, like, got people to not trust me as much as they could do. So I gave it up to get that trust back, and when I got it back, I did what I did with the whole team, and I really gave it all to make us more successful.
When Kjaerbye gets this offer, and obviously he has to, I mean, if you're on a contract, you have to go to your team and be like, I want to go to the, it's, like it's not like the old days of CS where you could literally just leave the IRC channel and you were just on the other team, So in theory, there's still a moment where even if he says, no, I definitely want to do this, there's still at least you can talk to him and go, well, maybe you could stay or something. Why is it so impossible? Because, by the way, it's not your fault. It happens in every country, I've noticed. Why is it somehow, like, impossible to sell these guys on the notion that, like, listen, we're better than they are now. If you stay with us, maybe, we can become like Dignitas did now. Maybe we can be the best team and win these events, but that can only work if you stay here. If you go over there, it's going to be ruined. I mean, there's a great example of this. Is a lot of people know this story now. Last year, JW not only was, like, in talks to go to NIP, he wanted to go to NIP before Fnatic won the 2 majors. So if it was up to him, he would have like 1 major right now, and who the fuck knows what would happen in NIP. But instead, he got blocked at that point in time by his org, and it worked out pretty well for him. So why is it so difficult to kind of like convince these guys to stay? Like, what is the allure that makes them have to go and play with these guys,
I think at the time when Kjaerbye left, it was... we got stuck on a level that we couldn't get better. Like, I also think that with that team we had reached our highest, to be honest. We had great team play, but we didn't have the firepower enough to make it like really far and become top 5 in the world. So I just think he felt like he wanted to try with them, and because he felt that he could move more with them. But I also think he have realized that it's not always green on the other side.
Yeah. So here's the thing, right? I actually have always thought Karrigan's a good in-game leader. Like, even when they were having problems in Astralis, like, I used to talk to him sometimes. Okay, sure, some of them might have been problems to do with him, but some of them definitely weren't okay. And so when he left off and he had to go to FaZe because he was basically kicked, I was like, okay, this is fine. He's still a good in-game leader. He can do things separately. But one thing I do have to say, and I have to ask you about, is when Kjaerbye was recruited to Astralis, you remember this quote by Karrigan? He said, I'm going to give Kjaerbye all of his spots that he had in Dignitas, and he hyped it up like, this guy, he made it sound like Kjaerbye's going to play just as well as he did in Dig, but on Astralis. And then obviously if you're an Astralis fan, you're thinking, right, well, that's it. Now they're going to be super duper, this is the missing ingredient. Now, obviously, Kjaerbye on Astralis has not been as good as he was on Dignitas. And in fact, Astralis as a team, bizarrely, have some of the same problems and still haven't really improved. What do you think of how Kjaerbye was on Astralis? Do you think they did give him all his spots and use him the same way? Was that real, do you think?
I think he got a lot of the roles, but I think that they didn't play the same way that we do. And I think that was the toughest part for him, because he thought that going to Astralis it would become so much more structured, and it would become so much easier to be good. But yeah, I think he had a hard time going into their games play style, and yeah, I think So this might sound weird, right? But I'll just give you a great example, okay? Because this was a private conversation, but it's not something like shocking, okay? But once, many years ago, I'll put it in the past, many years ago, I was talking to a French guy called Happy,
and he was telling me about a certain player that for whatever reason I might think's a good player, okay, who's like a star player. And I was telling him, you're using this guy all wrong, like, look, he's not playing as well as he could, and, besides, why don't you do this? And he was saying, yeah, but the thing you don't realize is because you don't know that guy, you don't play with him every day, there's a thing called a star player ego. And, a star player tells you, I want to play this way, and I want to do this. And sometimes you know better than him, and you can say, listen, mate, don't. Like, if you do what I'm telling you, we'll win more. But the star player ego, takes over, and he goes, oh, I'm going to do this over here. And you have to kind of let him do what he wants to do. And I said to Happy, this is the classic, like the punchline. I get to make myself look awesome here, even though I'm telling the story anyway. So then I said, yeah, you're right, actually. I agree. I understand the concept. There is a star player ego. But I said to him, but there's also an in-game leader ego. Sometimes the in-game leader does be like, yeah, I know better than you guys. I should do. And it's like trying to find the balance is obviously what nearly every successful team is about, because you need the good in-game leader and you need the star player. Now, if I look at Astralis, that is literally what, personally, I would put as their number one problem in all their teams they had, right? I wouldn't make it that they're jokers or this player was bad. And so, I look at the team on paper, it looked awesome, and I thought they probably should have won a major. But I noticed when I talked to some of the players and to Carrigan, it felt like that was the disconnect, Like, sometimes the star players wanted to say how things should be in the team, and other times maybe Carrigan didn't feel like he could just tell them, no, do it this way or whatever. What is your theory on why Astralis couldn't deliver the potential? Right? I mean, do you agree there's a team that should have won a major or something?
Yeah, I think they should have won a major at a time. I think that, I probably think that their biggest problem have been the trust to Carrigan, at least in the end. But I'm not sure because I have not been on the team, so okay. I don't know what went wrong. But I also feel like Device is a really good player, but I think he takes up a lot of space for the other guys in the team. So yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't played there, so I don't know. But at least at the end, I'm pretty sure the problem was that they didn't trust Carrigan, and that led to the bench. Even though I don't think that Carrigan was the problem.
Okay. Well, how about this like concept though, like the star player ego, the in-game leader ego? I mean, how is the balance like for you and your teams? Like, have there been times where you have to just kind of let the star players do their thing? Are there times where you get to have more of a say and kind of be like, no, I want you to play like this. You do this, okay, and just trust me on it.
It has been really different with the three teams I have had. Like with Pimp and Aizy, it was kind of I didn't have as much control, and Pimp would say Pimp would take more control than I wanted him to, and of course on the other team that we created with Tensky and RUBINO and Config and Kjaerbye, I pretty much I like had everything, and there was no egos to take care of because people just listened, and yeah, there was no problem for me. In this team, I would say that one of the biggest one of the like with the egos, it's probably that when cajunb came in, me and him, we have very strong opinions, yeah. And we didn't work together. We were like going the opposite ways. And I feel like now we have come together, and the fact that me and cajunb is working together is one of the reasons I think that we are so successful, because people don't realize how much work there is behind a team, team building and then practice and so on. And it's basically me and cajunb that come with a lot of things. And the good thing about, like in the former team, I had like no one that told me anything or came with like something new or something that I should think about. But cajunb is doing that, and the good thing about that is that you can improve much better, and if you really work together, it will work and you will become like really good. But in the start we didn't, and I'm really happy that we do now, because it's a deadly combo with me and him.
Okay, so this is an interesting topic, because when I talked about those problems in Astralis with like some of the star players in Carrigan, like this isn't something I was told. This is just me again trying to take my own observations and figure things out and get a theory, one of the people I actually put some of that on is Cajun, because I know when I've talked to him, he's someone where he seems like he has a very set idea about how he thinks things are, and then he seems a little bit stubborn, you know, like unless you can somehow prove to him that that's not the case, then he's not just going to like say, oh, okay, yeah, you might be right. So when he came into Dignitas, everyone was quite hyped, you know, because everyone hoped, okay, this is what I hoped at least, I'll just say that, okay. I hoped what would happen is, because he got kicked from Astralis, he'd be like really motivated, like, you know what, like, fuck these guys, like I'm going to destroy them when I play them. And then I was waiting for that to happen, and then the first like month or two was kind of like, this is a bit underwhelming, you know, he's actually kind of playing sort of the same level he was in at Astralis, you know, when they kicked him. What was the, you kind of described there, you had to kind of build this relationship up with him. What is he like as a person, as a player in that sense? Like, what did you have to figure out about him?
We basically had to figure out with each other, because at that time I have had a team where I could just, I could decide everything and nobody would question what I said or did. So at that time I was really strict and I was really, what is it called, stubborn, okay. I think. So I think actually that I was the biggest problem and why we didn't like work together, because I thought I knew everything, and if he came with something I would say maybe not work with him. But I think as a like Cajun is a player you would really want on a team. He can play with every weapon in the game. He is really smart. He doesn't do any mistakes. He can come with inputs. He can take initiative. And he's just like, I have always said that he is the best player in Denmark to have on a team. The only problem he have had is with attitude. And when I played with him in Nexus, he was really tough to play with, and he knows that himself. But I think that he have matured a lot, and the fact that like how he have been on this team is what actually surprised me the most, because before we got him in, I felt like I was scared of him having a bad influence on the other players on the team, because I know how he can be attitude wise, but he have surprised me a lot, and I think the way he have handled things is one of the reasons why we are so good as well. Like, for example, I don't think for 3 years ago, Config could do the plays that he is doing, or anyone else, without Cajun hammering him in the head. So I think he have matured a lot.
So when he came into the team, like I said, to me, the logic of why I thought it might work really well is, okay, he's going to get, in theory, to be a star player. So if he was ever unhappy in Astralis, you know, now it's like, well, this is your team, you know, you can be the star. I mean, he was replacing Kjaerbye, who obviously was the main star. Now, the interesting thing is, when he was in Astralis, even though he had some issues at times with this play, I always kind of gave him a pass, because I thought to myself, like, kind of like when you were talking about the pimp and Aizy team with Kjaerbye, like, there is only so much room in a team, you know. If you're a star and things are set up for you and you kind of have the space to operate and make your own decisions, there can't really be more than a couple of people can do that, you know. You can't have like 3 or 4 people doing that, because then there's no structure. So whenever you've got set stars, if you're like Cajun was, it feels like you're going to have to kind of give up a little bit to them. Like, obviously in Astralis, that was like the Device and Dupree show. You know, they're the big names. They're always going to stick together. So they kind of get their first pick of what they're going to get in the team. When he comes over to Dignitas, I thought logically, oh, maybe he's going to be the star player now. Now, what's funny is he's ended up in some mad scenario where it's just like, it feels like he's back in this kind of setup they had before. Because now you've got Config and Magic Spoy, obviously, here doing very well in the team. How much of a role does cajunb get in, as much as how much does he get to do what he wants to do? How much does he have to play for those players? Like, does he still get to be a star in Dignitas?
I think he is half star, half role player, I would say, but he got the orb on our team, so I think he is set up to be a star. But I also think that Magic and Config is doing a lot of plays, so sometimes he feels like he have to not do it, and we have worked a lot on that in the last days, trying to figure out how we can use him a bit better. And I have thought a lot about it, but I think he have done like if you see on his stats and how he have been playing, I think he have been playing insane compared to Astralis, compared to when he was in Astralis.
Yeah.
So I think he's set up to be a star player, but the thing is we have 3 star players now, so not every time they can all go crazy. But the fact that sometimes those 3 players play really good on the same time is insane, and yeah, it makes it a lot easier to call.
So, okay, this might interest you, okay? When you had that lineup that it was Kjaerbye and Configs, this is after Pimp and Aizy have gone, it was earlier this year, and Kjaerbye was the star player, etc. The interesting thing is, Config was there, but the thing is, he didn't play like Config plays now. And this is where the story might interest you. So I once talked to an Astralis player back at the time that this was going on, okay? And I was saying to them, I mean, it's the usual conversation. It's like, so who from Dignitas are we going to take and put on this team here? So they were figuring that out, right? And then one of them said, like, I think actually Config's probably going to be on our team one day, they'd even said, like, even last year I thought he was really good when he was in SK, and at the time I was just saying to them, like, what are you on about? Like, if you look at that team, it's obviously Kjaerbye you want in that team, right? Why would you want Config? And they said, but that's the thing, I think Config isn't as good, like, doesn't look as good to you, because he's put in the wrong role at the moment. Like, he's just not playing the right style for him, and he doesn't kind of get like priority in the team. Now Config in the new lineup is obviously, I mean, he won the MVP at Epicenter. He's doing amazing, obviously. Were they right to some degree?
I would actually say that they were right in some degree, because the way that we played with team play and like, I was very strict at the time with the old team, so he didn't get as much room as he does now. I think one of the reasons he have been so good lately is because he got a lot of room. We have defaults just getting him in positions where he can do his thing and make plays. So I think he's really good set up now, and it's one of the things I have tried together with cajunb and Roger, our coach, to figure out. And it's one of the things I'm glad we fixed, because he's an incredible player. Like, the things he can do on a server is absolutely insane, and I'm happy that we have made him come in some roles that he can deliver, and I'm quite sure he is happy as well right now.
So one of the things that you kind of touched on is that, okay, if like the lineup with Kjaerbye and Config was the one where you had to go the most deep into, like, okay, I mean, you kind of admit it yourself, like, we don't have the best aimers here, so we're obviously not going to win by just taking aim duels. We're going to have to actually use like team play and tactics to get our edge. That's where we're going to have a chance to beat these guys. And on that team, you went super hard at it, because at the time it didn't seem like you had so much firepower. In this lineup, as you kind of alluded to already, I mean, yeah, you have got like one of the best trios of players in the game, these 3 players. So what has the experience been like in that sense of like kind of like giving up some of the control to them, or making the game a little bit simpler, where, the old mentality would be like, okay, like, we're going to do these superset strategies, or we're going to do this. Has it been difficult to kind of like figure out the balance of when to give up some control and when to just let a star, like, for example, you can't basically tell Config. It's like I've got an old joke I always used to use to fuck with Khan, that Swedish player who used to be Forest's in-game leader, just to mess with him, right? It's not totally true, but there's a grain of truth in it. Like in every joke, there's a grain of truth. I used to say to him, like, Khan, I know you think you're really good at tactics and stuff, but you realise that like just telling Forest to go in the bomb site and kill 3 people with headshots isn't a tactic. Like, because the problem is, if you told that to a different player who isn't Forest, it wouldn't work. So that's not a tactic. That's called Forest, right? You have so. In a way, it is kind of like that with a player like Config, right? You can't really know what he's going to do when he gets in the bomb site. So how much is it like giving up control? How much is still having a system? How do you get that balance?
It was really hard to balance at first, because I have always wanted the stricter way. But we figured out a way to use him really good. And it was... I ate a lot of pride at the moment that... everything like in the team happened in order to make everyone happy with how we played, I just think that we have found a good way of using every player on T side, and Can you ask it a bit again? Because I kind of got...
I think you've answered it so far. Like basically, like how much do you have to kind of like balance out, like giving the star players the option to do stuff, and how much is like you have to tell them.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's hard to know when I have to go in and say do that and do that. Sometimes I make it loose and make them play just with communication, and sometimes I will go in, and if I really feel like I know how we can win this round, I will of course go in, and it happens a lot that I do that, but sometimes I also give them room to do their thing. So yeah, it's hard to know when to grip in, and sometimes when I don't grip in and we lose some, like when I can see in a round that we would have won if I just have called instead of giving room, it hurts a lot. But at the same time, when we win rounds where config or someone else just go insane, it weighs up.
So when Magix came to the team, it's true that he had just started to go a bit crazy in SK at the end, like it's just at the end there. But the funny thing is, obviously, in a weird way, even him leaving that team, somehow they got like a bit better, It's just funny how teams work out with, like, sometimes you can have a player who's very good, but maybe he's not the right fit for him. What do you think changed in Dignitas? Like did you know early on that he was going to be this role player and this play this role rather and be this type of player? Was this the vision the whole time?
It was kind of the vision. Like when we got Megasploit, it was basically, we just felt like we needed some firepower, and I was not 100% sure how we were gonna set him up, because we had Tinsky who did all those roles, like role player roles on T side, but he have done his roles really good, and I think he have done a great job.
So he's one of those players where it's always really hard to know if they're ever going to become really good, because I remember at the end of last year when he got a bit of hype, he had that run with SK where they went to Fragbite and like they almost beat Fnatic or whatever. So what happened at this time was he had that classic thing that a lot of players who might become stars or might just fail have, which is they're just wrecking everyone online. So everyone's like, oh, this is really good. But then on LAN, it's like, they have like the odd map. Like, he'd have like one overpass game every 3 LANs where he'd go super sick and everyone would be like, look, that's what he can do. But then he'd have other games where it was like, it's kind of, it's not working. What's changed in Magic's now? Like, how is he able to do this every map, basically?
I actually don't know, but I just feel like he probably feels that he have more support from the team. And I think that he feels like he can do some stuff that he maybe couldn't do before, because if he died, they would lose the round. And it's not like that anymore. But yeah, I got completely surprised by Megasboy. I thought he would be a bit of a young gun, not making a lot of mistakes and not good at team play and not good at communication, but he really surprised me, and he's a really good team player that doesn't do a lot of mistakes. So it's good that we got him.
So in the past, in the old Pimp and Aizy Dignitas, and then even the earlier one this year with Kjaerbye, one of the things that me and you used to disagree about is, I would say that Dignitas has quite a shallow map pool. They have like 1 or 2 maps they're really good on, then maybe they have like the 1 or 2 questionable ones. But if they go in like a full best of 3 against a top team, Thorin's always going to predict against them, because he's going to be like, they're not going to have enough maps, okay. Now, I know at times MSL disagreed with this. Like, even if the stats said Dignitas terrible on Inferno, MSL was like, no, good on Inferno. He had his own mindset about it. Not talking about this current lineup. Were some of those old ones, did they have a shallow map pool?
Yeah, I think we didn't have a great map pool at that. Like, I think the only time I have had a great map pool is now.
Yeah.
With that team. Basically, we had like 2 or 3 maps we could really play good on earlier. But yeah, it's a completely different story now.
So how has this happened then?
I just liked Inferno. Like,
yeah, it's true, yeah.
Banana was my...
Luckily, Valve gave you a favour there. They took it out the game, so you can't pick it anymore. Okay. So with the new map pool, though, right? this is one of the things you notice. I was pretty early on this train, which is like when I started watching Dignitas, you start to have the good results, Dream Out Bucharest, etc. I quickly noticed like this is a very weird team because it probably has one of the deepest map pools, and yet also has the most unique one. Where normally even someone who has a deep map pool, like for example SK Gaming, where they were the best, okay, yeah, they have a deep map pool, but in general, if they get an option, they're just going to pick train anytime it's available. Okay, they're going to pick their favorite map, So whatever the case might be, like that. But the interesting thing I've noticed about Dignitas is, first of all, you somehow have 2 permanent bans, but you just switch it up depending on who the opponent is, which is very unique. I've never seen that before. And then secondly, it feels like you also don't have the one map that you always pick. Sure, if teams don't know how to play nuke, you might pick that one. But in general, it feels like both for the ban and for the pick, you're kind of varying it depending on the opponent. And I don't think I can think of a top team that's had that before. So as an in-game leader, if you're a tactician, this must be like a great position to be in, right? How did you get this?
Yeah, it's really nice to have so many maps that you're good on. But it's not only my decision when we do stuff with the V2. I do it together with Cajun and Roga, and we kind of we feel really good on 4 maps. Maybe in we have a 5th that is but we are really good. We feel really confident on 4 maps, so we just pick what we think we should play against the team. It doesn't really matter for us which map it really is, because it's the same for all 4.
Okay.
So we try to pick against their opponent what they are not so good on.
So when we were at Cologne, and obviously you had a slightly different lineup to the one you've got now. When we were at Cologne, you said to me, you'd watch my video, okay, when I tried to preview the teams, and you were like, you think Dust 2 is our best map, but you're wrong. And I said to you, okay, so what is your best map? And this is the bullshit answer you said. You said, well, we haven't got one. And I was like, that's ridiculous, isn't it? How am I supposed to be right there? So here's the problem. At the moment, you also look like you have this really interesting map pool. Is there a best map for Dignitas? Do you have a best map, do you think?
I think Nuke is our best map for sure. But it's... Nuke is our best map, I think.
Okay. So here's the thing, okay? This is why this is a good time to do the interview for you, okay? Because, I got to wreck you a bit on the Inferno bit about Dignitas there, but obviously I have to give you credit now, okay? When you were trying to do that whole nuke thing back at the Cologne qualifier, I remember just thinking this plan will fail. It was already kind of up and down there, whether you won on it or not. And at the time, no one was good enough, or no one played nuke enough that anyone could say, this is our main map, And so it just looked a bit gimmicky, like you're only picking it because the opponent doesn't play it and it's available. But you have obviously become a very good nuke team now. And now we have got a couple, I did a video recently. As far as I can tell, there basically are 3 real nuke teams. There's you, there's NIP recently, and then there's Virtus Pro, obviously. But I noticed not only has it become a legit map that you actually can play consistently, but your team nearly always does its best on the CT side, which is like old nuke style. What do you like about nuke, and what is working for your team on this map?
I just think that on CT everyone have got roles where they can really perform in, but I think it's up and down because now we have seen it is swaying to the T side now. I think we have had quite some problems with the CT side. We played NIP in Brazil where we got 4 rounds as CT and we made comeback as T. And when we have practiced it, it has felt the same way. So I think CT is getting harder now because people are beginning to know how to play the T side. So I just feel like the fact that we played Nuke at ESL Cologne gave us a big advantage because then we could see our mistakes and really improve on the map. And I think that have done that we are way better than many teams on Nuke and have given us some good victories.
Why do you think Virtus Pro is so good on T-side? Have they figured something out that no one else has?
I think they have good tactics and they have really gone into the map. But I'm not sure. I just think that they have players that feels really comfortable on it, and I think they have studied tactics well.
Okay.
But yeah.
So again, also good timing for you because you now get to explain why you were right. Okay, so here's the question, MSL. There was a discussion on Twitter, and this is before MSL's Dignitas won Epicenter. So at the time, if the discussion is like, you know, fucking MSL and Fallen and Olaf Meister and Taz, if I name all these names here, everyone's going to be like, well, if MSL like chimes in, you know, he can just shut the fuck up because they're all great players winning tournaments, you know. So at the time, the discussion was, and it came from Fallen, you know, like nuke is the worst map, you know, no one plays it. Let's get it out of the map pool. And MSL popped in there, and obviously we all know this is back when you were trying to make nuke happen all the time, you know. You were popping in there like, no, it's a really good map, actually. You guys just don't know how to play it yet. Like, you know, learn how to play it. Like, and that was basically the gist of the argument, right? And at the time, I mean, people always seem to rag on you and say you whine. So people thought you were just whining because you like the map and you just don't want it to be removed. But it's true. There now are these teams that are good on nuke, and people at least even Navi's playing it like that. That says everything to me now. Even Navi was willing to play nuke rather than cobblestone. So, have you been proven right? Is nuke going to be like a viable map and become one of the better maps? And is it like a map that everyone can learn to play? Was it overhyped, the idea that like it's, you know, no one can figure out a way to play it?
Yeah, I just think it's basically because they're not taking the map with open arms and trying to practice it, so they just think that it's a bad map. But I think it's a really good map. The only problem is I just hope that Valve will fix the sounds, because that's a big problem. You mean
like
hear,
the directional aspect of it?
Like you just can't hear. Like if it's under, you can't hear properly, and if they're like, it's just hard to hear where players are, honestly. And I think that's the only problem. I think everyone can become good at it, and I think that Nuke is one of the maps where you don't need all the flashy plays, and you can actually play smart Counter-Strike and win because of that.
Does it surprise you that when SK won the major, they actually did play Virtus Pro on nuke? This is obviously before Virtus Pro became amazing on it, and you know they got a famous win there. But even then, they also played Flipside and had a close win on nuke. And at the time, sure, SK just was the best team, you know, and actually they looked like they could play almost any map because they had this just insane team play. Does it surprise you that they've been so bad on nuke?
It actually does. They have a really solid team that should be really good on the map, but I just think they haven't practiced it enough and haven't played it in enough officials. I think they will become good at it if they really give it their all.
Okay, so as a team, your big moment obviously was this Epicenter run. When you look back on it now, like, one of the things I normally hate about interviewing people, okay, is people who normally do just go to the semi-finals, like you did in the past, okay? So you make the semi-finals of a tournament, and sure, you have a close map against the better team, but the better team wins, as they probably should, you know, and then they go into the final, win the final. Every pro player in interviews is just telling me, like, no, I should have won, you know, I was unlucky, like, if I got this round here. And it becomes like a really boring, like, it's like the guy in a bar, you know, telling some story about, I could have got this job, and then the girl left me, and it's like, no one cares about that story, right? But if you'd have told everyone this story after Bucharest and the Star Series, everyone would have said the same thing, like, oh, you're just complaining, you're full of shit, your team, you're not going to win this tournament. But you won Epicenter in quite impressive fashion, you know, beating these best teams in the world. Was this obvious that Dignitas is going to become a team that can win titles? Did you know it already before Epicenter?
I knew it, I think I knew it when after DreamHack Bucharest. Like you could just, even like when we got Magisboy in, you could just feel that something were clicking, and we began to work together, and we have this great mixture of having two players that can, like me and cajunb, run the team and take the right decisions and so on, and we have Magisboy and Config that will go insanely huge and just frag a lot. And I think that's a great mixture, and RUBINO will do his role perfectly within the team. So yeah, I just think that we have a great mixture, and I sort of felt it when we got Magisboy in, that we could do some serious damage and win tournaments.
So people might not know this, because in normal tournaments you have been quite far, you've had some good runs, but MSL has never been in the playoffs of a major. It's correct, right?
Yes. It
So
is
then this might sound like a
tough.
crazy question. When we just talked about Astralis earlier, and the fact that even when they looked good enough to win, they never did. In fact, they never even made the final of a major. Is Dignitas and MSL, they're going to win the next major, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Why?
Because we have a sick team with good team play, and we know how to make players play better than others. And yeah, I just think we have a great mixture of knowledge and flashy plays and tactics, and I just think it's the moment.
Okay, so I referenced earlier that in a lot of scenarios about nuke, about fucking invites to events, about almost anything, there's like there's a stereotype of MSL on Reddit, which is like, oh, MSL's whining again. Like you've become like the NBK of the Danish scene in that sense. Everyone's like, oh, MSL whining as usual. Like, what do you think of this? Like, have people got the wrong perception of you? Do you complain a lot? What do you think of that stereotype?
I think it's really wrong. I think that people don't get me. Like when I'm whining, it's because I want things to improve. Like I hate the fact that I don't like to shut up if something is wrong, and I feel like it's not right. So yeah, maybe I think people will always feel like I'm just complaining, but I just want to make things improve. And it's not like if I whine about something, it's not like an excuse for me or my team why we didn't do well or whatever. It's because I just want to make things better.
If you go to Reddit, don't do it. I don't know why anyone would ever do it. It's a bad idea. It's just there's nothing there for anyone, okay? But if you were to go to Reddit, for example, and you saw before Dignitas won Epicenter, you went through any of the game threads, the famous thing that people do, okay, is the player with the worst score and the player with the negative on the differential on H. Everyone just says he should be kicked out, and then they pick a good player, usually not even the same fucking role. Like they say, like, kick out MSL and bring in Valde or something. Like, so that wouldn't even make any sense whatsoever. But you understand this happens, right? You are someone who gets bothered by that, right? That people essentially think MSL is just... Okay, here's what they think, right? They think that you have, like, no skills and you're just a brain going round the map. That's it. That's how they think of MSL. You don't like this, right?
No, I don't like it, but I think it's the way it is because people obviously look at the stats and believe that stats is everything. What I do great and why I really make a team perform is not in the stats and will never be, especially when we play like we do now. Like on teams there will always be hard roles, and one of the hard roles is going in first, and what we do right now is basically me and config will run together for most of the maps on defaults and take over places. And like if I can force a trade, like if I can, like for example, go to a place and I know that I will probably die here, but config will get the trade, I will do it every time because then we get the advantage, and I can use my knowledge and Cajun can use his to make us win the round. Like, and I think yeah, people have a really wrong understanding of stats. Stats is basically showing how good the superstars are that are set up to do a good job. And I think that's the case. And like I'm fine with having bad stats and doing the hard role as long as my team knows what I'm doing for them.
Sure.
If they didn't, I would begin to consider doing something else and set myself up in positions that I like to do instead of doing what I think will make the team perform better, if you get me.
Okay, so you said there that, like, I mean, you said you also did it in the past, like with with Aizy, like you were basically the entry man, and then the other guy who's like the star player, comes after you. And this is a classic way to play Counter-Strike, actually, because the idea is the first guy in often's going to die anyway, like he doesn't know where the enemy is. And not only is he going to like maybe do a little bit of damage to the enemy, but he's going to be able to tell the guy behind him where he sees him. And then it's sort of like, it's almost like giving the guy behind you like God mode, he knows exactly where they are. They might be damaged a bit, and now he's a really skilled player and he gets the kill. I've noticed actually that in the old days of like Very Games and Titan, this is actually how Existence used to do it as well. He also used to just be the first guy in and use his aimers to like trade and clean up, In general, in your teams, do you give yourself the harder role? Like on CT side, do you give yourself the role no one wants? How much of it is actually do you get the roles you want?
Like on CT sides, it's basically the guys that choose what they want to play. But the fact is, actually, I have learned a lot from like when we created this team. I found out that basically many of the roles I have on CT now is something I like to play, and is actually quite good on playing it. And I think I have done a much better job recently on playing CT sides. But my problem is still the T sides, because like sometimes I will die 5 times and we will get the trade, and like I said before, I don't want to say it twice. Okay.
So if someone is one of those fans, let's call them, let's go like the Smiths route and just call them noobs. So they only know about scores and frags, they don't know what a player does. If you had to just give people a little insight, right, what do you think is the most difficult CT position to play in Counter-Strike? Is there a map and a spot that's like very tricky, or, takes a lot of skill or nuanced like experience to know how to play that spot? Is there one that comes to mind?
Probably drop zone on couple will be one of the hardest, I think.
What makes it so hard, do you think?
Like, it's so easy to take and it's so hard to hold it, and just that's the first thing that pops up to my mind.
So who is a player who plays this as CT that you're impressed with how they play it? Who do you think does a good job?
Kjaerbye did a really good job in our old team. As far as right now, I really don't know. Maybe Get Right.
Okay.
He's doing a pretty good job at it. But I think, like, generally on CT side, I think, like, of course there are better positions to get frags than others, but I think generally that you can become good at every position, and if you're playing well on CT side, like, you can play well no matter what position you have. If you're playing well, you will get plus stats. But it's on the T side, like, some players have to do the shitty work, and some players are set up to kill. And, like, for example, there are different ways of doing stuff. Like, you can take, for example, Happy. He is not doing as me, like, he is the lurker, and he have set himself up to frag more, and he is doing a good job at it. But then someone else like Apex have to do the shitty job, and like no matter what team it is, somebody is gonna do the shitty job, and they're gonna get worse stats than the superstars that are set up to it. Like, if I played the lurker role, I could probably get better stats, or I know I could get better stats, but it wouldn't help the team as much because I couldn't do like all the mid-round calls, early round calls, and like tweak little things when we take over. If I see that smoke, we can do that, and I can't really control it the way I wanted to. So that's one of the reasons that I don't set myself up, but the players around me.
So, as I mentioned before, your team was one of the ones where, before Valve came in with the coaching rule, you were going to have your coach be the in-game leader, and you were just going to be a player. You're just going to be another player. Now, does that mean that at the next major, you should just bring along like a huge cake for whoever it was at Valve who made that rule? Because would the team have been as good, would have been as successful if you'd have got to do that? What do you think would have happened if you'd have gone that approach? Because obviously you've had so much success since. People will think it's better that you didn't. What is your take on it?
I think we would not become as good as we are now, but at that time, like, the only reason that that I wanted to do that was because I didn't feel any trust because I haven't done my job. Like I said earlier, I wasn't motivated and I didn't like show what I can do. So of course people are not gonna trust what I call or what I like respect what I want to. So that's the reason I stepped down, and I think that we wouldn't have become as good as we are now. But I think that my stats would be over 1 rating, and it would look good for me, but it would not look better for the team. And that's the most important thing for me. Like,
Okay. So if RUBINO watches this interview and he's got all the way through, it's like super long interview, and he's going to be like, what the fuck? I play in Dignitas. Like, I'm not mentioning this whole thing. It's like all about all the star players all day long. And MSL. What does RUBINO actually do in Dignitas? Because obviously, I mean, his role's changed up over the different lineups, right?
yeah, he on the earlier lineup he got more room to make plays because Tenske was basically doing a lot of role play and I was doing it. So RUBINO had more like room. On this team, he doesn't have as much room, but like RUBINO, if he is on fire, like you sometimes see, he's an absolute fucking god. He is a really good aimer and he is really smart as well. So I just think it's about him for having confidence in himself is the biggest problem for him. But I think that he is doing a really good job for our team, being a good role player and know when to do what. And he's good at making team play something that you need on a team. Like if we had 4 config and me, it wouldn't be good. So
Well, certainly. That's an understatement, I think. Okay. Okay, so I want to ask you a question that's basically, listen, if you really believe this is a chance to just wreck Thorin outright, I once gave this chance to NBK. I once told him, do I overrate existence, right? And he just wrecked me completely and said, well, I mean, in his world anyway, like told me all the reasons I do and I'm wrong and all the rest of it. So I'm going to ask a similar question, okay? One of the stereotypes about me is people think I overrate Device, right? Because I think he's like amazing player, you know. I've got him as like one of my all-time great players. I think, sure, he might have had problems. Like, he probably was a bit of a choker in the past, but feels like he's got over that. And I don't really blame him for a lot of the problems in current Astralis, right? Like, I look at him, he still looks like he plays pretty well, and the team has problems as a team, okay. But you're someone, obviously, who hasn't played with Device in a CSGO team, and you've just been on opposite teams watching him and playing against him. Do I overrate him as an individual player, do you think?
I'm not quite sure. I haven't made my mind totally up myself because I have never played with him, so you can never know what he really does and how it feels within a team. But from what I heard, he's a really good player, but he maybe take a bit more. He takes a bit too much room for other players to perform. But yeah, I think he's a really good player. I really do. But I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you overrate him or not. I think right now he is in positions where he is not as impactful as he was before.
Okay.
But yeah.
One of the things I've always had as a theory is that I know a lot of fans think that the hardest team to play against, right, is just like the team that has the superstar player. So if you play Na'Vi, obviously Guardian's going to be the guy killing you. But personally, I've always had the theory that it's not like star players as much as it's like the style of a team that's hard. Like certain styles obviously don't match up very well. And so sometimes, I mean, for example, famously, your team was able to beat Envious earlier in the year when Envious was probably a better team than you know. So it's not like that means you're as good as them. No, they were probably a better team, but you had the right matchup for them. What is the most difficult matchup for this Dignitas to play against? What type of team or what specific team, what style is the hard one at the moment, do you think?
It's absolutely playing against FaZe, actually. I don't know why, but FaZe is wrecking us every time we meet them, and it feels like they are... Yeah, I think the hardest thing for us to play against is like really good individualists. I think the easiest team to play against is the ones that play more on team play. Okay. Because we will both have... better firepower than them, I think, and we will have better like decision making than them.
Like, can you give me an example? What team do you think when you think of that? Who else has team play style?
Like, no, I'm not gonna say.
Okay.
I'm not.
It would have been good trash talk. Okay, right, fair enough. So, okay, he's pulling back from the trash talk at the end there.
Yep.
Okay, so we got through a lot of stuff for this interview. I gave you a lot of chances to say that you were right and explain your MSL theories. What would you like to say as a final message to anyone who's watched the whole interview, or is there anyone you want to shout out, etc.?
I don't have so much to say anymore. I think we covered pretty much a lot we could, but I want to say thanks to the fans that are supporting us, of course, and I really hope we can do some serious damage in 2017, starting with the major. So, yeah, thanks for the interview.
Okay, tusind tak.
Det var så lidt.